Chris and Chris Talk Movies.
Hello, and welcome back to the podcast. My name is Chris Ferry, and of course, this is my co-host.
My name is Chris Huddleston.
And today we are both very excited to be talking to you about is it a Prime original?
Yes.
The Prime original film, Totally Killer.
I'd like to report a crime that hasn't happened yet. Have you seen the movie Back to the Future? Basically, I'm living that movie right now, which is how I know there's gonna be a murder tonight.
Hate time travel movies. They never make any sense.
Happy Halloween.
How about we all stay in and hand out Halloween candy?
No, Mom.
You know how hard this time of year is for us. Your friends were murdered 35 years ago. It's not 1987 anymore. Stay safe, honey. I love you.
What the fuck? Excuse me, what year is it?
1987.
Oh my God.
I know. The 80s are almost over and I haven't even tried Coke yet. I don't know.
Oh my God.
Mom.
Fuck off and die.
Jesus, Mom.
Mamacita. Ay. Ay, ay, ay. Mamacita.
Time for my birthday, bitch!
This is a creepy-ass cabin in the middle of fucking nowhere.
What's the big deal?
There's a murderer on the loose, and you drove us into the woods.
Oh my God! What? I forgot to bring vodka.
You have 7.5 hours until you're stuck here forever.
I need to stop all this horror before it happens. Do the machines kill us all?
No, they more just rip apart the fabric of our society via dance videos on TikTok.
They use dance against us?
Come on out. The water's warm.
Just so you know,
I don't do blowjobs. You pee out of that thing.
Just think, maybe if she did do blowjobs, she'd still be alive.
Yeah, let's not make that the lesson. 80s weed sucks.
This is just dirt. Look at all these twigs. I could give you a gummy this big that has 100 times more weed than this.
Do you have a synopsis for us, Mr. Huddleston?
I do, and we will warn you ahead of time. So this is exclusive to Amazon Prime, and it just, as of the time that we are recording, it just came out about a week ago. So it's a 2023 film. It's brand new, and
we're going to spoil it.
We will spoil it. So if it's something that you're interested in, and you don't want it to be spoiled, watch it first before you listen to
This.
All right. So it's a 2023 film, and I don't know if I can pronounce the director's name, Nahnatchka Khan. But so here's the synopsis from Rotten Tomatoes. 35 years ago, after the shocking murder of 3 teens, the infamous Sweet 16 killer returns on Halloween night to claim a 4th victim. 17-year-old Jamie Kiernan Shipka ignores her overprotective mom, Julie Bowen, warning, and comes face to face with a masked maniac, and on the run for her life, accidentally time travels back to 1987. The year of the original killings. Forced to navigate the unfamiliar and outrageous culture of the 1980s, Jamie teams up with her teen mom, played by Olivia Holt, to take down the killer once and for all before she's stuck in the past forever. So I actually watched this twice. I watched it once, and I liked it, and I said, hey, maybe we should watch this for the show, or do this for the show. And you were in town. We got to record another episode together, and then we just said, hey, let's watch this together. So I've watched it twice now. But so you have seen it once. What did you think of it, Chris?
Well, I thought it was a lot of fun. We were just coming off watching Booksmart and The Breakfast Club, and we were talking about, the difference between 1985 high school movie, arguably the 1985 high school movie, and in a 2019?
2019. Mm-hmm.
Very different, very different high school movie. So this is a high school movie that references the 80s very heavily, right? It's Back to the Future. I mean, one of the things I love about this movie is they just jump right into it with both feet. There's like they make the obligatory, like, oh, I don't think anyone says don't change anything, but it's like everything you change is going to have effect in the future. And she basically runs headlong into the past, windmilling her arms. Like the first thing she says to somebody is like, hey, have you ever seen Back to the Future? So I'm basically Marty McFly. I'm from the future. I got to stop and kill her. And I loved that. I love just how headfirst it went right into it. I think the lead actor, I think she was great. We picked out a bunch of Canadian accents. Ostensibly, it's an American story, though, right?
Yeah, it takes place in the United States.
Yeah, but everybody is sort of talking about this and talking about that, and I'm like,
she is not Canadian, the lead, but
no, but enough of the other characters are that you're sort of like, I think this was a Canadian movie.
And her mom, Julie Bowen, is probably most famous for she's on Modern Family, and I'm pretty sure she's American as well. But yeah, there are some other. We've looked it up, and some of the other actors are Canadian.
So it gives it this kind of brightly colored, fresh scrubbed, apple cheeked after school special kind of vibe. But it is a movie that sends up 80s slasher flicks. The killer stabs people 16 times, and they make none of the violence is particularly upsetting. But the it's a guy who is killing people with a knife by stabbing them 16 times. That's upsetting, right? Texas Chainsaw Massacre, it's not, but it's still. I thought it was kind of interesting the way that it feels like this kind of Canadian after school special, but it's about, it's like, oh, aren't murder movies fun? I mean, I guess from one angle, but they're also kind of upsetting.
Well, in this, we should say this is a comedy horror or horror comedy, and it's much more leans into the comedy than the horror, and also the time travel aspect. So she time travels in. Her friend makes a time machine in a photo booth, and this is definitely not going to be a movie for people that want to nitpick, all the how everything works, because it's not this kind of not that kind of movie. The killer is chasing her. She jumps in the photo booth. He stabs the control panel for the time machine, and that causes it to, for her to go through time.
Right.
So if you're gonna be, critiquing all of the this wouldn't work and that wouldn't happen, like, this isn't the movie for you.
Right.
That's not what this is about.
It's Scooby-Doo physics.
It makes about as much sense in terms of that as something like Hot Tub Time Machine,
Yes, exactly. Well, Hot Tub Time Machine had fun with it because there's the character who says, I think was it Patrice O'Neill was the actor that actually got the line where he looks dead. He looks straight down the lens of the camera and is some kind of hot tub time machine.
Yeah.
Dead straight. And this one doesn't get to deliver that line. Nobody says, oh, it's totally killer, I don't think. Or if they did, I missed it. But they might as well have called the time machine the device, because that's all it is.
Right.
Yeah. But they cast it in a very progressive, very modern way that I thought felt not forced. It felt fun and fresh. The science kid and her mother, actually, who created the time machine, are, really beautiful Black women. Like they, the compatriot of she would have definitely been one of the hot kids, but she's not. She's a science kid. So, and the lackadaisical, incompetent, like willfully bad cop is an Asian actor, so they
Mhm.
mix it up, and I I think in some movies you feel like that sort of rainbow casting is forced, but it doesn't here. I think it's part of the fun.
Yeah, yeah, and somewhat along those lines, to me, some of the funniest jokes was the lead, and I even though I watched this twice, I need to look up what her character's name was in this. Her name is Jamie, so that's Kiernan Shipka, and the only thing that I knew her from was I watched a couple of episodes of the new Sabrina the Teenage Witch show that they made for Netflix. She starred in that. And that ran for 2 or 3 seasons, I think. And I just watched an episode or two and was just sort of like, I'm not really into this. But I didn't, other than a couple of episodes, I did not watch shoot, I want to say Breaking Bad. It's not Breaking Bad, but oh shoot. What was the one about the Mad Men?
Oh.
So I guess she played his daughter in that show.
Oh
So
my God. Oh, well, you had said that she was in Mad Men, and I was racking my brain I'm like, who in Mad Men? But I was thinking of the adults, of course.
yeah,
Now that you mention that, yeah, I was like, she does look really familiar to me, though. Just because she plays Don Draper's daughter.
she's only 24, and I mean she's 24 playing 17 in this movie, but she would have been because Mad Men has been off the air for a while, so she would have been young, in that. But at any rate, I didn't know her for much, but I thought she was really great. And to me, a lot of the funniest jokes were her 2023 sensibilities with, and then going back to the 80s. And there are a lot of jokes, like she shows up at the school. She knows that she's going to have to go to the high school to figure out, because this is it's a slasher, but it's a murder mystery because you don't know who the killer is. And, so she's trying to figure out who the killer is to stop the killings from happening in the future because her mother gets killed in 2023. So she goes to the school and there's like a woman at the desk there and she says, yeah, I'm a new exchange student from Canada. And she says, I'm sure you're going to have to check your database and all that stuff. And the woman just says, okay, here's your schedule. And she's like, that's it. And there are other incidents in throughout the movie where she's just like, wow, security. And she's like, I don't want to ever get on a plane in the 80s, because it's just like security of everything is really lax, and there's some things with like there's one part where she's at a party. She kind of crashes a party, and before she sort of befriends, so there's this group of mean girls who are mean to her for like an hour, and then she wins them over and befriends them,
whom her mother is one.
Yeah, and they do some really good jokes with that because her mother in modern day is this very sweet woman, and there's one part in the very beginning of the movie where Jamie kind of back talks her, and she's like, the mom says, I would never talk to my mother the way you're talking to me right now. And then in the 80s, we see a scene where she's in the basement and like her mom comes down and she's like, Mom, just get out of here. It's like really, so she's really, really mean, But there's a part where Jamie she sort of crashes this party and one of the mean girls has her boyfriend take her, she's like, hey, get her out of here. And he just grabs her and picks her up and she's like, hey, unwanted touching.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of jokes like that. But I saw, I was reading some stuff on Twitter about it and I saw one person who was like, I didn't like the movie because it was too political. And it's like, I mean, I didn't feel like they just made jokes about how things are different, now versus then, without, I felt like leaning into like, oh, look how woke people are now or whatever. I thought they handled that really well.
I agree with you. I didn't think it felt preachy.
I didn't see it as political. I mean, people seem to think like, oh, if you're just going to make any kind of reference to anything, then that's political, I guess.
No, I think it was a way of acknowledging how different stuff was in the 80s in a light way that you could make. I mean, they made jokes out of it.
Yeah. And we were alive in the 80s, so it's like it's not like Back to the Future where it took place in the 50s and we weren't alive then and we just had to go on what we've seen in TV and movies or whatever. Whereas with this, we lived through the 80s and it's like, yeah, I bet in the 80s you could have just walked into school and there wouldn't have been any like record. I can remember this wasn't even the 80s. This was in the 90s when I was in college. The way that they took attendance is they passed a sheet around the classroom and it had everybody's name with their social security next to it, social security number next to it. And you would just check that off and nobody was like, somebody's going to steal my social security number, but like a kid now would be like, this has my social security number on that. You're not allowed nobody's allowed to see this. So yeah, I thought a lot of that like really landed well, and the 80s kids are really dumb, which I mean was just funny,
They're horror movie stupid.
Yeah.
Like it carried, that's the joke, carried to the nth degree in there. They're always drunk. And there was a funny bit where somebody shows up with pot brownies. This is in the 80s.
I love this. Yeah, and this was great.
Our main character is like, she's like, oh, man. She said something like, I'm hungry. And the girl who brought the brownies was like, have a brownie. She's like, I've already had like 5. She's like, whoa, you're going to be high. And she's like, were they pot brownies? And she goes, yeah. And everybody else is already high. And she's like, I don't feel anything. Why don't I feel anything? And then she just figures out that 1987 weed is terrible.
The girl hands her the bag of weed, and she said she put a pound of weed in the brownies.
A pound.
And she hands it to her, and she looks at it, and she's like, "This is just dirt and sticks."
Yeah.
She's like, I could give you
weed sucks.
She's like, I could give you a gummy.
One gummy.
One gummy would just blow you away. Yeah. So that was. Yeah, I thought another thing that was funny is so her dad in present day, her Canadian actor dad is again, he's very sweet and this just very nice, like sort of nerdy guy. And he tells her, he's like, oh, back when I was in high school, I looked like Zac Efron. I had abs and everything. He's like, oh, gross, Dad. And then they go back to the 80s and he is all ripped and he has long hair and stuff. He's just this kind of bro guy, So that was funny too.
I think they really fill it with a lot of fun. I mean, I would be interesting to see if younger, I mean, it lands with us because we lived through the 80s, and it would be interesting to see if younger viewers who didn't, thought that some of that stuff was as funny.
Yeah. I mean, again, I guess it would probably, I would imagine they would probably look at it the way that we look at Back to the Future, because again, we weren't alive in the 1950s, but, we still thought all of those jokes were funny, so.
Yeah, but I didn't feel like too many of the Back to the... Yeah, maybe that's true. The Back to the Future 50s jokes weren't particularly insider jokes about...
No. I mean, it was a lot of stuff of just, like how music had changed and like, he plays...
Yeah.
Basically, he plays Johnny B. Good, but he basically plays the guitar like Eddie Van Halen, and all of that. Yeah. So,
and this one, there's a ton of direct homage to that film, right?
Yeah. They mention it several times.
They call it out by name. It's part of the plot. She uses it to explain her situation. And that movie was out. So she was like, have you seen Back to the Future? And like, oh yeah, great movie.
Yeah.
She was like, oh, perfect. So I'm like Marty McFly. But there's a lot of the same jokes, right? I mean, there's one where Marty McFly meets his own father, and he's a contemporary of his own father. And he's like, come on, Daddy-o. And so she goes, Jesus, Mom, Masita? Ay, Chihuahua, Mamacita.
And then she speaks Spanish. The mom speaks Spanish too.
The mom speaks fluent Spanish. Yeah.
Yeah, so I think, I mean, I guess maybe Back to the Future is arguably the most famous time travel movie. Definitely the most famous time travel comedy. So it makes sense, I guess, to reference. And that's one thing I'd say. I will watch almost any movie that has a time travel
Sure.
plot. I'm a sucker for those, So even if they're bad,
Well, one of the things that I think was so successful about this one is just how clever it is. I mean, it is a genre mashup. It's a time travel movie, it's a slasher movie, and it's a comedy. And I think it gets away with all of that. Which is kind of a coup, to smush 3 genres together and get away with it. I think because it commits the most strongly to the comedy.
Yeah.
But just to touch on another one we've done recently, The Flash, one of the things I really enjoyed about that is they go to a different timeline, sort of a different multiverse timeline. And the Michael Keaton Batman explains to them, oh, you've probably seen a movie where it's like he takes these 2 strands of dry spaghetti and it's like something happens here. And then he sort of bends one of the pieces of spaghetti and it creates it, right? It's like time doesn't work like that. It's like it affects it upstream and downstream in all directions. And if you mess with it too much, you get something like this. And he takes a bowl of cooked spaghetti and dumps it on a plate. And you see how everything's all intertangled and woven around. And I really just enjoyed that little Star Trek explanation moment where somebody bothers to stop and talk about how the scientific premise of the whole thing actually works. And he also basically, the Marvel Cinematic Universe has been doing it a lot recently. So that's the more direct reference. But really, it's the kind of Back to the Future thing where they draw doesn't Doc take the chalk and draw the...
I think so.
This is the point. We've created a thing here and it splits off, So, lots of movies reference Back to the Future.
Yeah.
But Back to the Future can't have been the first time travel movie.
Oh, no. Because, there would have been H.G. Wells' Time Machine.
Sure, right. But, that's not the only precursor, right?
Yeah, there would have been other...
I got to look that up.
Yeah, I can't think of any off the top of my head, but there was the one Time After Time that one came out in the 70s where it was
I guess Planet of the Apes is kind of a time travel.
Yeah, Planet of the Apes, but Time After Time I think is Jack the Ripper somehow travels into like the 1970s and is killing people in the I think. I'm just going by memory from when I was a kid. But yeah, there's been a lot of other time travel movies.
I think Back to the Future was just, a Steven Spielberg slam dunk. And that's why
it was such a, massive, hit and just had such a cultural impact,
We ought to do that because I've been meaning to show that to Nova anyway. And if memory serves, the way we talk about Indiana Jones or the Raiders of the Lost Ark, I think it's a pretty perfect film. I think it's pretty tightly coiled. I don't think there's a lot of wasted space.
Yeah.
We ought to do that. If not next, we ought to do that sometime soon.
Yeah, that'd be fun.
I think it squares with the Christmas Eve vibe as we come into the holidays. I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah.
What else?
I don't know. Like you said, I think this was, pretty smartly written. Like I say, those jokes, those various jokes just about the difference between now and then, I thought were really clever, like you said. It's a little bit slapsticky, but not too much. A lot of it plays with those 80s kids versus her. She just seems so much more mature compared to them.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think. But yeah, I thought she was a great lead.
She really was.
Sort of like I'm drawing a blank on her name, but the No One Will Save You that we did a couple of episodes ago. That was another great lead. So I would like to see, I'd like to see her in more stuff. I'm sure Amazon seemed to have really pushed this. So I'd be surprised if it doesn't do pretty well. It's kind of, how they determine ratings with streaming stuff is kind of foreign to, it's easy with movies in the theater. It's like, oh, it made X number of dollars, but how exactly they determine something, I guess it's just streams, but they definitely put a lot behind it. I don't know what the budget of, I don't know if their budgets are available or not, but let me see what, it was a Blumhouse production. So they usually do pretty small budgets. Budget. Well, I'm not seeing what the budget is. So they apparently don't make that. It says, wow, 34 million. Still, that's not a lot, in this day and age.
It is not. But it's a decent budget.
Yeah. There's not a lot of effects to it. There's the time travel effect, which isn't super great or anything, but the rest of it is just the stabbings and stuff like that.
Right. The time travel effect, but it's really not the point.
Yeah, this is all about the humor.
I'm just looking at
time travel movies.
And we've watched a number of them. Time After Time is in there.
Have you ever seen that one, Time After Time?
No, I don't think so.
I don't think I have either. I'm familiar with it, but I don't think I've seen it. I think
Source
Malcolm McDowell was in it.
Have you ever seen Jake Gyllenhaal in Source Code?
Yeah, it was the guy. It's I forget what his name is, but it's David Bowie's son. He directed. Did you ever see Moon?
Yeah,
with Sam Rockwell. He directed. So I saw Source Code in the theater. Because I liked Moon so much, and it's not bad. It's worth a watch. It's a little more. It's more like what's the Tom Cruise movie that we did, Edge of Tomorrow?
Edge of Tomorrow, yeah.
It's more like that, where it's a guy like living. I think he gets killed over and over again. So it's more kind of the Groundhog Day thing than it is a time travel movie, as I remember it. It's not bad. I mean, it's worth. I like Jake Gyllenhaal.
There's a couple in here that I haven't heard of. There's a
Donnie Darko is a time travel movie.
Donnie Darko is in here. Army of Darkness is in here. Woody Allen's Sleeper is in here. So I mean, there's some.
So that would have been Sleeper would have been before Back to the Future, right?
Yeah. Tenet is in here. Tenet's interesting because Tenet's not. It's funny. It's a movie based around time, but I don't think of it as time travel in the same. Tenet is actually a really interesting film.
Yeah, I saw that in the movie theater.
Looper's in here. Run, Lola, Run. No, I know. Well, you have to watch it a couple of times.
Yeah.
There's some Nolan movies, right? There's we've done Edge of Tomorrow, right? I really love Edge of Tomorrow. I just recently Arrival is on here. I just recently watched Arrival. I don't think of that as a time travel movie, but I get why they say it.
Did you ever see The Butterfly Effect? Did you ever see that movie? I don't know if that's time travel or if that's multiverse kind of a thing.
I never did. And number one is Back to the Future. Could there really be any other? Yeah, I think it's just I think it's just that it's such an entertaining, airtight film. I mean, obviously there's lots of holes in it. People love to point out the holes, but in terms of an entertaining ride, I think it was just it felt like such a slam dunk that yeah, baby. And it's about time travel, right? You got to get back. The whole thing hinges on particular events that you got to recatch right at the same time, So we
talk
time
about
crimes
a clever
we've
script,
done. Yeah, it's a very clever
time
script.
crimes. Time Crimes is great.
Groundhog Day, but
Yeah.
they don't play with somehow Back to the Future like this film. This idea of you gotta get back through, you gotta get back to where you came from.
Mm-hmm.
Instead of just being surfing around, or Tenet where things are going multiple directions in time, or Interstellar.
Another great one,
you know.
Another great one that I'd like to do that I know we've mentioned on the show before, but we've never actually done, is Primer. You've seen Primer, right?
We didn't do Primer? I have seen Primer.
Yeah. That was one that I'd love to do that one sometime, because it's so complex that the first time I watched it, I wasn't 100% sure if I got all of it. I've watched it at least twice, maybe 3 times. That would be a fun one to do sometime. Are you
sure we haven't done that? I think
we haven't done it.
I think that's why I watched it.
We've talked about it, but we didn't do it for the show.
Huh.
Yeah.
It's interesting. I love that it's an independent film. I love that it's such a small undertaking. I love that it's such a clever and elaborate script, and that they pulled it off with such limited resources. I love all of this.
I think it cost $8,000 or $12,000.
But I don't love the film, and I think it's just the other side of the coin of that admiration. Is it feels like an $8,000 movie. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So, we can do it. I'd rather do Back to the Future.
Sure. Yeah. It's not like something we have to do right away, but that director did another movie called Upstream Color. That's really interesting too. It's the same kind of, it's not a time travel movie, but it's the same. It feels a lot like Primer. It's really complex.
One of the things, and then we're talking about Primer, one of the things I so admire about Primer is, as someone who makes no budget movies, is the preparation that had to go into that. Like the script work and the planning of the script and the thinking about it in those terms and what they can do and how you can make something, how you can create an effect with your audience without spending money on it. And really, a time travel movie demands a certain broadening of the scope. And like with a zombie movie, if you don't have a wide shot of a horde of zombies, I think most zombie fans, you got to have that. That's part of a zombie movie. If you don't have that, they feel a little cheated by it. And that's an expensive shot, So, and this is a film that managed to pull off a complex, brain aching time travel, premise. I don't know what the budget was, but if you say it's $8,000, I believe you, because this is really like a couple of guys made a movie with the camera and themselves, and it's remarkably good.
And basically, he, so the guy, and I don't remember what the guy's name is. I should look it up, but who he stars in it, but he, I believe, wrote it, directed it. He stars in it, and he wrote the music too. He scored,
did the music.
So he did everything. Which is pretty amazing.
That's a big
there's not a lot of characters in, but yeah, Primer. If you're into time travel movies and you haven't seen Primer before, it's a very interesting movie.
You know what? The trap of it is, it's good enough that, like my complaint, that it's good enough that it crosses a bunch of borders. And then you're like, I just wish this looked better. You know what I mean? You're like, so it's like, as it gets better, you're taking the audience's expectations with you, and sometimes you end up with this sort of inadvertent sense of disappointment, because the movie, maybe it's just me as an audience member, but the movie is good enough that it raises expectations to a point that you can't meet.
Yeah.
And
it was I didn't see it in the theater. I saw it on DVD, but it was early 2000s. I want to say like 2003, 2004, something like that. But you had that period there where the shot on digital was just starting to be a thing, and you had some of those really low budget shot on digital movies that made it into the movie theater. Like, for example, did you ever see Open Water? It was
No.
about a couple where it was a shark movie, and it's about a couple where they're out. I don't know if they were swimming or their boat crashes or what, but it's just them in the water and there are sharks circling around. That's basically the movie. But it was, I saw that in the movie theater, and it was, it was the digital wasn't quite ready for prime time. You even had, a great movie and a great director, but you even had Collateral, that was one of those kind of first early like big movies that was shot on digital, and it's still, he did everything that he could with it, but it still wasn't quite there yet. It looks, you can tell it's shot on digital, but I don't know, that just made me think of you had that for a while there where there's, digital, like really low budget movies. Well, another one was 28 Days Later.
Yeah.
Shot on digital, and it worked, but
yeah, and now you can emulate film and just about anything you want in camera. Now you can process, well, not in camera per se, but you can emulate things digitally. But we made Salvage in 2005, and what we did, we had a Panasonic camera that was digital, but there was a mechanical thing that we put in front of the lens, and I forget what it was called, but it was two little circles of slightly ground glass that vibrated oppositionally to create grain. So it was a physical grain creator between the light coming in from what you were shooting and what was going into the camera.
Ah, that's interesting.
And, certainly when you look at Salvage, there are certain scenes when we either didn't have the thing on or we didn't have it with us. We were just, in error, that you can see the stark difference of what looks egregiously digital and what stands up a little better as, emulating film. But it's remarkable how that little device gave texture and character. And that was not even 20 years ago.
Yeah.
But now, as somebody who we like the thing we just shot, we were using Blackmagic, and another thing I saw a guy shooting it on the Red. It's like it captures so much data, and people have been working on it for so long that you can do almost anything with the image.
Well, and we've gone totally the other way now. That it's rare when Quentin Tarantino is known for, he still shoots on film. And I think will not. He only has one more. He says he's doing his last movie, but has never shot on digital, as far as I know. And so you're the other way, where almost everything is shot on digital now.
Well,
even
it's so much
gigantic,
cheaper.
big budget movies. Yeah,
and you can see it right away.
Yeah,
I guess they must have things that allow directors like Tarantino who are shooting on film. There must be some digital solution that he's able to look at it right away, or a monitor that's hooked up that he can be watching while they get it. That would be insane to me if they don't, but because that advantage is just, you used to have to be sitting there next to the camera and be like, oh, I think that was the take. Did we get that? You want to be looking at it through the camera. You want to see the framing and everything.
Yeah. So back to Totally Killer. So sort of to come back around to the beginning, I had brought this one up because I thought it went pretty well with those other two movies that we talked about, Booksmart and The Breakfast Club. And I just wondered how because we talked a good bit about, you'll have to listen to our Breakfast Club and Booksmart episode, but we talked a good bit about the problematic elements of
Breakfast Club.
The Breakfast Club, and that was another thing that I thought that, without directly referencing specific movies, I thought they did a really good job with kind of addressing those problematic things. Because there's one part where they're in the school and they're talking about I guess they're getting ready for this party or whatever, and the one girl's boyfriend is like talking about having some drinks or something when he drives, and she's like, "Oh, that's a really bad idea." And he goes, "Oh no, I drive better when I'm drunk." And I can remember, like being in college and people claiming that they're like, "Oh, I'm actually a better driver when I'm drinking."
Yeah.
And
she says, "You were 100% not."
Yeah. And I
Yeah.
have statistics, that I could back it up. And her dad, 80s version of her dad, is just like, that sounds like something a chick would say. And then
Right.
she says something else. And then the other boy is like, "Oh yeah, that's totally what a chick would say."
Right.
So
So
I think they say because I think they say, "Well, you would say that because chicks are bad drivers," and then she says the thing about the statistic. They're like, "Oh, that's exactly what a chick would say."
Right.
So
they say it in reference to illustrate a mindset at the time, but they managed to do it in a way that is like watching The Breakfast Club. The parts that are shocking are really shocking.
Yeah.
To a modern sensibility. And you go, ay, ay, ay. Like, it's hard to sit and listen to them because it's done so in earnest. And at the time that wasn't self-conscious. They weren't trying to make a point. They were just like, oh, this is like the real texture of high school. And it was.
Yeah.
But the result is that you really feel shocked by it. You go, ah, man, like that is terrible. And so this one, I think, references like, oh, it was a different time, and they make jokes out of it without feeling
pretty lightly.
Without
they
feeling
don't get
like
into like
exactly
a bunch of slurs and things.
Yeah, they managed to avoid like one of the guy who says I'm a better driver, and he was always grabbing his crotch, and so it's like, oh, that's rude and totally inappropriate, but it's eye roll stuff, and she comments on it and calls him an idiot.
What was the one line where she said, because there was that scene that I referenced earlier where he carries her outside and she's like unwanted touching, and he throws her down on the ground and then just stands there and belches, and she says like, is this a real person?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So I just thought her comedic timing and her delivery of all the lines and everything was really great, because obviously it all hinges on her. If she's not funny, then the movie's not going to be funny. And
she
I thought
is funny. Yeah, she
was
really
a really
delivers.
good comedic actor. Yeah. So,
yep.
Well, anything else for Totally Killer?
I don't have a lot more to talk about. I do recommend it. I think it was a fun watch. I don't think it's going to go down in it's not aiming to be a capital G great movie. It's just it's entertaining and funny. And it successfully crosses the genres, which is kind of a coup. And I think it's a fun popcorn movie. I think it's a fun watch. I think that the scary stuff does, it's not horrifying, but the scary stuff is like it's effective.
And it takes place at Halloween time,
in a fun way. Yeah.
It's a really good one for spooky season. And, I don't have kids, so I don't, I'm never sure about, but I think maybe, older, like kids the age of the characters in this movie could watch with their parents and not be too embarrassed.
I'm not going to watch it with my kids. Like, I'm not going to watch it with
your kids
Nova.
Your kids would be a little too young.
She wouldn't be interested. She'd be interested in the horror aspect of it, but not the kind of, oh, that's what it was like when I was in high school aspect of she wouldn't care. Yeah.
But, and it's, it's not really scary, in any way. It's much more.
It's not really for kids. I mean, high school kids, sure. But I think it's aimed more at the age of the people that are in the movie and their parents, like us, so that you could all sit around as a family, but maybe not with your 8-year-old.
No.
Because people get murdered and stabbed 16 times.
Well, and
everybody's like, what's the big deal? I'm kind of like, I don't know. It's upsetting to me.
There's, sexual references and there's F words and that kind of thing.
They're always talking about BJs, just casual beige and the okay.
So
oh, there is one scene where the lead gives one of the girls that she knows is going to be murdered a rape siren. It's a thing that looks like a car key fob, and then you press the button and it sort of makes this extremely loud squeal, and that's what you're supposed to do if you feel like you're being threatened. And she's like, what if he kills? She's like, he stabs you 16 times. Don't worry about it. You'll be able to get it out. And so there's this scene where he catches up with him and shows up behind her and slits her throat from behind, and then she presses the the alarm. So it's like I'm laughing at a person getting a throat slit, but they play it as a laugh where he cuts her throat and she goes before she falls down. Now that I say it out loud, it doesn't sound funny, but it was funny when you watched it. No, it was
funny. It was funny in the context of the movie for sure.
What about you? You recommended, I guess.
Yeah. I mean, I liked it enough that I watched it twice, and I thought it was a lot of fun. I think definitely, horror fans would like it because, the horror elements to it. And I thought it was really funny. I mean, I laughed out loud, just watching it by myself a lot. So yeah, I would definitely recommend it. And if you have Prime, it's right there.
It's right there,
ready to watch. I think it's a great. When we're recording this, it's almost the middle of October, so I think it's a great, thing to watch for spooky season.
Seasonal, yep.
Yeah. So,
Chris and Chris Talk Movies at gmail.com. That is our handle. You can email us. You can send us a message. We're on the socials. You can like and subscribe. You can check out our other episodes. Maybe you're watching us on YouTube, or maybe you are listening to on your favorite podcast thing. Either way, thank you so much for joining us. It's fun to do this, and it's fun to feel like there's somebody out there listening to us. Two middle-aged white dudes talking about movies.
That should have been the name of the show. Two middle-aged white
guys talking about it. So what are we going to do next time? Do you have a sense of one?
We talked about a couple. A few episodes ago, we talked about Babylon. That's one that I still want to watch because I think it'll be interesting.
It's like, oh my God.
That's the only bad. That's another thing nice about a movie like Total Killer. It's just like an hour and a half.
Yep.
Perfect length for a movie. When we were together last, I brought up two Frankenstein movies that I've never seen either of them. One is I think it's Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, that is Kenneth Branagh and Robert De Niro as the monster. I've never seen that one, which you said you've seen before. And there also is I believe it's from 1985, The Bride, which is Sting as Dr. Frankenstein, I think, which I've always wanted to see. And you said you'd never even heard of it, right?
It vaguely rings a bell, but I've certainly never
seen it. I think Jennifer Beals is the bride. So anyway, those are a couple of spooky season kind of things that I don't know if you'd be interested in either of those.
I mean,
or we can.
I'll do
think
it.
About some other one.
I'm not excited to see either.
Oh, okay. Well, if you're not excited, we don't have to do either of them if you're not excited. But
the reason I want to do something like Back to the Future is it's fun. I've enjoyed.
We can do Back to the Future.
These have been fun movies. Let's do Back to the Future because it's fun.
Okay.
And you know what? I'll trade you. Then we can do one of those Frankensteins.
Okay.
Or Babylon.
Or we can do Babylon.
I'll just break it up. I'll do it 2 nights. I'll watch half.
Which I think supposedly, I mean, that's what I'll do. I think it's supposedly a comedy.
Babylon?
Comedy-ish. Yeah, I think it's supposed to be fun. I think when you look it up on...
it was a flop.
I think it was a flop. It was a big flop, yeah. Which that's part of why I want to see it, is I just want to know why it flopped. I mean, they released it on Christmas Day, I think, or right around Christmas Day. IMDb. They the first genre they listed as is comedy, drama, history. So,
all right.
I don't know what that means.
Well, I like Margot Robbie and I like Brad Pitt, so I mean, how bad can it be with
Who
those
doesn't?
two people? Yeah.
Probably somebody out there right now is like, I hate them.
They're so ugly, those two.
They're so ugly, yeah.
Hard to look at.
That was another thing, like you said, with this movie, where they didn't really, even though the mean girls in this are mean, they don't really, there's not really like bullying in this and stuff. And her friend's mom, who she's then, friends with in the 80s, like you said, they're both, like, everybody's attractive in this movie. But she was like the science girl, but they never showed her as like an outcast or whatever, because that always takes you out of movies when it's like, oh, here's this really attractive person and they're bullied,
They're unpopular.
They're unpopular.
Yeah, but that is one glaring absence that I think that the Breakfast Club did get right and made perfectly clear. It was almost encouraged the bullying. It was like survival of the fittest, and it's like it almost institutionally encouraged how cruel the kids were to each other as a point of just a day-to-day. Everything out of their mouth was like, cut somebody else before they can cut you. It sucked. I hated that.
Yep. So alrighty.
All right, my friend.
So we will do Back to the Future next.
Yeah, baby. Maybe you've heard of it.
Maybe you've heard of it. Yeah.
And unless you have anything else you'd like to add before we sign off,
I think that's everything.
Then Chris and I will talk to you all next week.
gonna be a murder tonight.
Hate time travel movies. They never make any sense.
Happy Halloween.
How about we all stay in and hand out Halloween candy?
No, Mom.
You know how hard this time of year is for us. Your friends were murdered 35 years ago. It's not 1987 anymore. Stay safe, honey. I love you.
What the fuck? Excuse me, what year is it?
1987.
Oh my God.
I know. The 80s are almost over and I haven't even tried Coke yet. I don't know.
Oh my God. Mom.
Fuck off and die.
Jesus, Mom. Mamacita. Ay. Ay, ay, ay. Mamacita.
Time for my birthday, bitch.
This is a creepy-ass cabin in the middle of fucking nowhere.
What's the big deal?
There's a murderer on the loose, and you drove us into the woods. Oh my God! What? I forgot to bring vodka.
You have 7.5 hours until you're stuck here forever.
I need to stop all this horror before it happens.
Do the machines kill us all?
No.
They more just rip apart the fabric of our society via dance videos on TikTok.
They use dance against us.
Come on out. The water's warm.
Just so you know,
I don't do blowjobs. You pee out of that thing.
Just think, maybe if she did do blowjobs, she'd still be alive.
Yeah, let's not make that the lesson. 80s weed sucks.
This is just dirt. Look at all these twigs.
I could give you a gummy this big that has 100 times more weed than this.